I will make these commitments to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, then you will see the world differently. And sometimes, sometimes the receipts take you into places that you don't want to go. And that's just the reality of the situation. Sometimes when we are in a search for what the truth is, it takes us down paths that we're scared to walk down. It takes us to doors that we don't want to open. And it shows us information that we don't want to admit is real because it goes against everything that we thought was true up until that point. And I think for quite a few people, the topic that we're going to talk about today on the stream is not really something that people want to see. I mean, I saw this very clearly yesterday. What we're going to discuss today on the stream is not the answer that people want. It's not the answer that any of us want. It's not the answer that I want. Do you guys understand how much I idolize James O'Keefe and the work he did with Project Veritas going back to the Andrew Breitbart days? Do you guys understand that what I'm doing in terms of infiltrating the schools and getting into these woke training events and showing you what's really going on? Do you guys understand that that was like inspired by James O'Keefe and Andrew Breitbart? That I thought constantly about Andrew Breitbart and James O'Keefe when I was writing my book, Actively Unwoke. Like, that's the reality. So I don't want this to be true. That James O'Keefe is a narcissist who is running a smear campaign on Project Veritas. I don't want that to be true. I never wanted that to be true. But I just can't deny it anymore. Based on, first of all, I knew this yesterday. And I talked about it, like the stream I did last night about where we watched James O'Keefe's private Twitter space. And I streamed it. And that's when I really started coming to the realization of what was going on, was hearing him on that private Twitter space. And then watching him on Tim Pool last night. If you watch that stream or were live, you saw me coming to the realization of what was going on quite literally in real time. And it wasn't the answer that I wanted to land on, but that doesn't mean it's not the correct answer. And so last night, after the stream, I put out this thread on Twitter. And this is one of the things we're going to walk through today. And this is basically a thread walking through the publicly available receipts that we have and have had since February when all of this started. And we're going to walk through this today. So I put this thread out on Twitter last night. And I also responded to Project Veritas's tweet about the defamatory narratives spread by James O'Keefe. And I said exactly what I said on the stream yesterday, which is that if you actually read the lawsuit is very, very clear. James broke his employment agreement, and that's what the lawsuit is about. And I stand by that. And then I posted the thread on there as well. And the responses I got on that thing, I understand that a lot of people don't want to hear this information. I really do. But it's ugly, guys. It's ugly. So after I wrote this thread, you guys know, like I'm friendly with a few people at Project Veritas because they're like I've taught a couple of them like how to speak socialist, for lack of a better term, or have given them tips and tricks here and there for like when they're going and infiltrating these different groups. I've taught them, like, about the language and all this stuff, and I hope that, that we're gonna be able to, take some of the information that I have about the schools and what's going on where and make something of that. So I am friendly with some people at Project Veritas, and I have been for a while. But I wanna be very clear, I have never been on the payroll of Project Veritas. I have never made 1 cent from Project Veritas, okay? Like, I am very much an outsider. They do their thing, they are their own organization, and that's really the extent of it. I've talked to them here or there. Well, I have talked to over half a dozen people that currently work at Project Veritas since this morning, since they saw this thread. And do you know what they've all said? And these are people that some of you guys would know. Like, these are people who are publicly associated with Project Veritas. Like, if you go on their Twitter profile, they have Project Veritas in it. They have they're like, there's some reporters, there are some people behind the scenes, there are some, like, there are people at all different levels of the organization with all different levels of involvement in this situation. And I've spoken to over half a dozen of them in the past, 12 hours. And every single one of them says exactly the same thing, that what I wrote in this thread was the truth. And they were actually surprised. There were some of them that were like, "I'm really surprised that you deduced what was going on based on the public information." But it's the truth. And even beyond that, it's worse than you even understand. It's worse than I understood. It's worse than it is worse than the information that has been released. First of all, James has done more things than they have released publicly. Now, those things are all going to come out. Every single thing that I'm going to talk about on this stream is going to be confirmed and will come out, I think, in the course of the lawsuit. But they can't put it out right now because putting out the information right now would jeopardize the organization. But every single thing that Project Veritas has put out and that I'm going to tell you will come out in the course of this lawsuit. You can take this to the bank. It will come out in the course of this lawsuit. Of course, no one will apologize to me. I will never give my "I told you so." Okay, I'll take my "I told you so" once the information comes out. James has done some truly horrid things. James was putting himself up in suites in luxury hotel rooms all over the place on Project Veritas's dime. James was going out to eat in these fancy restaurants all on Project Veritas's dime. He was traveling around to things that had nothing to do with raising money, as he keeps saying, like, all I was doing was to raise money. It was to raise money. It was to raise money. It wasn't all to raise money. Some of it was to raise money, but not all of it. James once told a woman working for Project Veritas that if you get pregnant, you're going to get fired because the pregnancy would have gotten in the way of raising more money. Recently, a member of like someone that was affiliated with Project Veritas died. And when when they called James to tell James this person has died, James glossed over that and made the entire phone call about him. And I can go on and on and on and on and on with the things that I have heard today from various people. And again, Every single thing that I'm telling you is going to come out in the course of this lawsuit. So you don't have to believe me because every single thing I'm talking about is going to come out in the course of this lawsuit. And sadly, they can't speak out until then, which is going to take months. But the reality is already out there for anyone who is willing to look at the receipts. And we will walk through the receipts today. And I'm going to tell you more. There are conservative influencers like Viva Fry. I had already blocked him on Twitter a long time ago. I blocked him after the Eliza Blue thing. I was really disappointed in that. There are influencers that know what's going on, that are still shilling for James publicly for clout. Steve Bannon told Project Veritas, I shit you not. Steve Bannon told Project Veritas that it was Project Veritas's job to cover up for all of James O'Keefe's misgivings. And Steve Bannon didn't care if James O'Keefe was doing things with kids. He didn't care at all. It was Project Veritas's job to cover up for everything that James O'Keefe was doing because James O'Keefe is just too damn important. Those are your conservative influencers, guys. Viva Frey, in this tweet, is overtly misleading his audience. Overtly misleading his audience about what's going on. And we're going to talk about that. Do you know another thing that's overtly misleading people? Do you guys know how last night on Timcast, there was the big breaking news on Timcast that the executive director of Project Veritas had resigned. And everyone is saying that the executive director of Project Veritas resigned because they're suing James O'Keefe because of this lawsuit. And what they're doing is they're making it seem as though the executive director of Project Veritas resigned yesterday. He didn't resign yesterday. And Tim Pool knew that based on the date stamps on the email that he read last night on his show, but didn't show last night on his show. The executive director of Project Veritas did not resign yesterday, and he did not resign because of the lawsuit. He resigned last week because they are fundamentally restructuring the organization because of all the bullshit that James put them through. So they're changing a lot of the ways the organization is run. And the executive director just didn't think that there was a fit anymore. But it had nothing to do with suing James O'Keefe. And it didn't even happen yesterday. It happened last week. And the person who leaked the email to Tim Pool is a former Project Veritas whistleblower that is shilling for James O'Keefe. Even though that person knows what's going on. This is all so dirty on so many different levels. And no one is telling the truth. I have been getting text messages all morning from influential conservatives that you guys have heard of that will not speak publicly about this, but that are texting me privately and saying, you would not believe the stories I have on James O'Keefe. But they won't say them publicly because it would jeopardize their status and their clout and their clicks and all of this stuff. It's dirty. It's really, really dirty. And I am so sorry, guys. I really am. I am sorry that this is the reality. I am sorry that this is the situation that we find ourselves in. I didn't want this to be the case, but it is true. James O'Keefe James O'Keefe has been the aggressor in this situation with Project Veritas from the very beginning when they removed him or they didn't remove him, they suspended him from his role. He got pissed off, and this was after they had uncovered egregious conduct. And it was after many employees had complained about his conduct and the impact it had in the organization. And we're going to review some of those complaints today. And every single thing that the employees said all lines up with James O'Keefe being a narcissist. And so James O'Keefe was removed from his decision-making position at Project Veritas because he tried to fire senior executives at Project Veritas who had uncovered his egregious financial misdeeds within the organization. And James didn't want to pay the organization back, and he didn't want that information to be exposed. So instead, he obfuscated the approved process, went around the board of directors to try to fire the CFO instead of actually, you know, rectifying the fact that he spent a metric ton of the organization's money that he shouldn't have spent on things that were not related to the organization's business. And then the board removed him from that decision making position, and James O'Keefe leaked it out to the media. And that's when this all took off. James O'Keefe has been the aggressor on this since the beginning because they took James O'Keefe out of control. And we're going to talk about it. So that's the majority of what we're going to do on the show, guys. And again, I'm really sorry. I I cannot even begin to express how sorry I am that this is the answer. This is not what I wanted. I've said it from the very beginning. Like, I I didn't think that Project Veritas handled the situation well from the beginning. And by the way, there are people inside of Project Veritas who also don't think the situation was handled well from the beginning. I'm not the only one that had that perspective. But two things can be true at once. Project Veritas could have mismanaged that situation from the beginning, and James O'Keefe can also be a narcissist who is running a smear campaign against Project Veritas because he's pissed off that he got taken out of control. Those two things can be true.